Okay, I realize that I'm 5.5 years late to the party, but with the MCU Fantastic Four somewhere out there on the horizon in the next few years or so, it was inevitable that I had to talk about this anyway. So I figured we'd just get it all out, and I could put it behind me and never have to worry about it again, unless I do a commentary one day. God help me. I made it my mission in life when this came out in 2015 to never even watch it or talk about it, but knowing how people are on the internet, I didn't really want to fight that battle. And the thing with COVID-19, with not a whole lot of new stuff coming out, your brain starts to look for alternatives. With that being said, let's talk about Fantastic Four, or Fan4Stick, or whatever the hell it's called. Whatever title I use, I don't really care. Basically, the plot of this movie, it's not even a plot. It's basically one giant trailer for a movie that doesn't even happen. Miles Teller as Reed Richards is trying to crack interdimensional travel, and he has this fascination with going through different dimensions and different planets as a kid. Growing up in New York City, he befriends a young Ben Grimm, who's experienced some kind of abusive home life. And from that point on, as they go through high school, they try to figure out ways to go through interdimensional travel. And they're recruited by the United States government trying to do a similar thing. Franklin Storm, who's part of this project, recruits Reed Richards into helping them trying to crack the formula on the travel, with his adoptive daughter, Sue Storm, played by Kate Mara. And then they later bring in his son, Johnny, played by Michael B. Jordan. Eventually, Ben Grimm is brought into the mix, and Victor Von Doom, played by Toby Kebbell, is dragged in here too. So basically, they figure out a way to go to the other dimension, and they get all these superpowers on this weird planet, this green goo or whatever. Why does it have to be green goo? And we have our movie. A lot of what I'm going to say has already been said, because I more or less feel the same way. Although, I have to say, that the first hour or so, I actually thought it was okay. Definitely not good, but it's not terrible. There was something there where I thought, okay, maybe there's something in there worthwhile. There were certain concepts that I thought were kind of interesting. Victor being this loner hacker of some kind, who the government doesn't really seem to like, but they feel obligated to recruit him on this project anyway. Sue and Johnny being adoptive siblings of some kind. They're not part of the same racial background. Victor supposedly having a romantic past with Sue. And the tone overall feels like a nice mixture between Steven Spielberg and David Cronenberg. The body horror, the space interdimensional travel. There was some interesting stuff in there. No way done in the smoothest way, but I did kind of like seeing that. The pacing though was just so bad. It felt like the beginning of the movie just went on for like 2 hours, and that by the time we get to the climax, we'll get to this later, but it really feels like a huge race to the finish line once the 1-year time jump occurs. Now, as far as my history with the Fantastic Four comics, I'm not really familiar with the source material. Based on what I've read, the encounters that Spider-Man has in the original comics with the Fantastic Four, including the 2005 Fantastic Four iteration, which I have the Blu-ray copies of right here, that's about my level of knowledge with the characters. And talking with other fellow nerds over the years, they're not really superheroes. They're scientists who get caught in these superhero heroics when they go out into space exploration and they encounter this cosmic storm that gives them all these powers. And they supposedly represent their personality traits of how they are as people or as human beings. And they learn how to be not only a team, but a cohesive family unit of some kind, dealing with all these crazy, wacky superheroics. There's been 3 incarnations of the Fantastic Four in live action. One from the early 90s, which was straight to VHS release, the 2005 version, both movies which I saw in theaters at the time of their release, and then we have the 2015 Fantastic Four. And the general consensus is that none of them have been great. Amidst the world of all these great comic book movie adaptations and television show adaptations we've seen, Marvel's First Family still has yet to actually see some kind of legitimately good quality to it. The closest that we'll ever get is the 2005 version, but we'll get to that in a little bit. But so far, yeah, like all the attempts of trying to breathe life into the Fantastic Four have failed considerably in some ways. This movie had some potential. We had the guy, Josh Trank, as the director who made the movie Chronicle, also starring Michael B. Jordan, and there was certain things that started coming out about him feuding with the studio execs at Fox. Probably the biggest red flag, right before the movie's release, he put out a tweet saying, I have this fantastic version of this movie, but you'll never see it. Yeah, to say the least, that's not really encouraging. And the trailers as they came out didn't really wow me, and I was hoping that maybe they could, but I was getting Amazing Spider-Man vibes, basically saying that we just made this movie to retain the rights. And with all that stuff leading up to it and the knowledge of Josh Trank supposedly feuding with the studio, it's pretty clear. These two parties were not on the same page. The first hour, up until that 1 year time jump, it felt like Josh Trank was going for something unique. Not good, but there was at least something there. The body horror scene where they wake up and discover their powers, that's probably the best scene in the movie. Specifically right before he wakes up in the gurney, when he looks back and he sees that his legs are stretched out. It's kind of terrifying, but it's a really cool idea where you go, oh, so that's what this movie is. Okay. Then you see Ben waking up realizing that he's a rock monster now. Sue is going in and out of being visible. Johnny wakes up as a Human Torch covered in fire, which that effect looks a bit cartoonish, especially in comparison to the 2005 version with Chris Evans. But to my knowledge, fire's not an easy effect to get right, so I guess it's somewhat passable. But that was the best scene in the movie because it kind of touches on the fact that these aren't exactly powers, they're illnesses that they have to try to figure out how to cure. And ultimately, as the stories go on, they learn to accept their powers and embrace themselves as a family unit and team, basically. Up until this point, there was quite a few red flags that I caught on to. Just about everybody was just so lifeless and robotic. They didn't really seem to be that interested in being in this movie. Miles Teller, he's a great actor. Whiplash, Spectacular Now. On paper, he's a good choice for Mr. Fantastic, but he just comes off as so lifeless and just bland. He has a couple of okay-ish lines when he's asked, hey, do you want a drink? No, ethanol kills brain cells. And then in the next scene, he's drinking alcohol. And the funniest moment in the movie is when they make a successful test run on the interdimensional travel. Johnny puts out his fist for a fist bump, Reed taps his fist, and Johnny gives him this look like, dude, what are you doing? Again, not too familiar with the source material, but that kind of reminds me of something that Reed Richards would do. Another red flag that I caught on to, from who I've talked to with other fans, Reed Richards is supposedly one of, if not the smartest guy in the Marvel Universe. And they show in one scene, or one small moment, where Victor Von Doom is supposedly smarter than him. A small moment where Reed's writing out this formula on this chalkboard and Victor Von Doom goes, no. He erases it, then he writes the formula again, and Reed goes, oh, yeah. It's a small detail, but I thought, wait a minute. That doesn't seem right. Even the 2005 version got that right.
Time for your lesson. Chem 101. What happens when you rapidly cool hot metal? Ben.
In some ways, Victor might be smarter than Reed, but ultimately, Reed's got the upper hand. And the supposed setup for the romantic connection between Reed and Sue, it just comes off as forced and awkward and just dull. It doesn't feel genuine. It doesn't feel like a real relationship. And Jamie Bell as Ben Grimm doesn't really have much time in the movie to begin with right before the trip happens. There's a long stretch where he's not even in there. And I thought, when's Ben Grimm going to show up in here? What kind of excuse are they going to have to bring him in here? The best actor in this movie for me is Michael B. Jordan. There was a huge controversy in regards to the race thing where they cast a black actor as a character who's originally white in the comics. I don't really care about that. I just care about if they get the character right in execution. And if they had a good reason for doing that, where they hint at them being adopted siblings, maybe I would have been okay with it. But ultimately, it wouldn't have mattered if he was white or black or Hispanic or whatever. The character isn't really that interesting, but Michael B. Jordan has his moments. He's got charisma, he's really likable as an actor and as a person overall from what I can tell. And having seen him in other movies like Black Panther and Creed 2, he's more than capable, and thankfully, he's managed to move away from this movie afterward. Dude, seriously, you deserve so much better than this. And that's the thing, you got a great set of actors in here. They've proven themselves in other projects. Unfortunately, they got nothing to work with here. They do fine with what they got, but that's really all you can do. And certain scenes and certain lines where you could tell that they kind of work, that they're trying to make the material worthwhile, but it has no weight to it. And Simon Kinberg, who oddly enough wrote the screenplay for X-Men Days of Future Past, which I think is the best X-Men movie in that franchise and one of the best comic book movies I've ever seen. Either he got lucky with X-Men, or maybe he just needs somebody to decipher his ideas. And Toby Kebbell, who played Koba in Dawn of the Planet of the Apes the previous year, when they announced that he was going to play Victor Von Doom, I thought, that's a great idea. Okay, let's see what he does. And I like the concept that he was kind of a loner hacker of some kind. Ultimately though, that's all thrown to the curb. Oh yeah, and originally his name was going to be Victor Domashev, but then due to the fan backlash, they decided to keep his name Victor Von Doom. And there's even a line where Sue says, look at Dr. Doom over here. And that's supposed to be like a tongue-in-cheek sort of haha, but in the vein of the movie that came out, she's just basically saying his name. And then once they get their powers, he gets left behind on the planet when all the chaos happens. And I knew at some point he was going to have to come back, and that maybe they would actually cut to him trying to figure out what exactly happened to him. That's not the case at all, though. The big red flag, though, for me, is when Reed wakes up and he's asking where his friends are. That, I thought, okay, that's something Reed would do. He cares about his friends. Then when he sees Ben through the vent, he escapes and abandons them. I thought, wait a minute. Ben and Reed are like this. They're best friends. Reed would never leave him alone like that. And then it cuts to 1 year later. I swear to God, that's when the movie literally takes a huge nosedive into the dirt. Now they've gotten used to their powers, they're killing people for the military, they're looking for Reed Richards, who's apparently in Latin America somewhere, which by the way contains the worst special effect I have ever seen in a movie. Apparently Reed has this ability to make his face change, so when he gets back into this car and he warps his face back to his normal face,
It's hideous!
just thinking about it, oh God. So they capture Reed, and they end up sending a bunch of people back to the planet that they were on, and they discover Victor, who's all covered up in an organic metallic alloy, as it was mentioned in the previous iteration. And apparently he found this cloak and hood? Okay, is there an alien civilization on that planet? He's learned that Earth is not worth saving, and then he decides he's going to destroy the planet for some reason. Okay, I'm not going to beat around the bush here. Doctor Doom is the worst supervillain that I have ever seen portrayed on screen. And in regards to his look, he looked god-awful. He looked like the bad boy version of C-3PO. I'm not exaggerating. Take a look at his look in the movie. And he has these psychic powers where he walks down the hallway and people just die because he's that powerful. Yet he couldn't do the exact same thing with the Fantastic Four at the climax where he shoots another beam in the sky, which we've seen a million times before around that point. And I'm not afraid to say this, but Toby Kebbell's portrayal in this movie makes Julian McMahon look like an Oscar contender in comparison. As bad as that representation was, you at least felt like there was some kind of progression with that character. We saw in real time what was driving him to become Doctor Doom in some way. Speaking of that, the 2005 version, look, I know a lot of people hate those movies, and I'm not going to put them in the top 10 best of the genre, but the thing is, as stupid as those movies are, there's a good sense of energy to them. They're fun, enjoyable, and they nail the team dynamic very well, as it was in the source material. They felt like the Fantastic Four. Plus, you got Chris Evans and Michael Chiklis as Johnny Storm and Ben Grimm. Just like Ewan McGregor in the Star Wars prequels as far as the acting goes. Those two guys are the one aspect of those two movies where most people will go, okay, that's fine. And based on what I've seen from the Fantastic Four comics, I think they also do a good job of capturing the original charm and tone of the original comics. Stupid and cheesy as they are, I feel like they got that down at least. I'm not against going for a more serious and dark tone in a comic book movie, but if you do it to the point where it's just boring you out of your mind, which this movie most certainly does. No, I'm just going for the colorful adventure. Shoot me. In a lot of ways, I felt like this movie tried so hard to be the Dark Knight of the Fantastic Four. And they even tried to do the Avengers thing, where they tried to build this world that exists somewhere. So they end up killing Victor, and they establish his headquarters somewhere in the middle of the United States, and that's about it. In fact, the whole story, if there is a story, there really isn't one. Nothing happens in here. The Fantastic Four form up to crack interdimensional travel. Victor Von Doom meets them. They go to space and get their powers. They jump to 1 year later. Victor Von Doom's a bad guy. That's it. Nothing major happens in here. You go back and watch the trailers, you've seen the whole movie. Even then, there's stuff in the trailers that's not even in the movie. And another indicator that you know that it's bad, Stan Lee has no cameo in here. Let that soak in for a minute. You know what, Stan? If you're up there listening to me, you made the right decision. So in conclusion, Fantastic Four or Fan-4-Stick, whatever you want to call it, it's probably, no, not probably, it is the worst superhero movie that I have ever seen, and one of the worst movies I've ever seen. The characters are bland, the story is not good, the directing's not good. Just about everything in this movie crashes so hard into the dirt that I don't really know what else to say. I really don't. I just thank God that Marvel finally got their hands on the Fantastic Four, because if you ask me, they are in much better hands under Kevin Feige's leadership. Until then, I'll just pop in the Blu-ray copies of the 2005 version, because as far as Fantastic Four adaptations go, for the time being, that's probably the best that we're ever gonna get. Finally got that out of the way. So what are you guys' thoughts on this movie? I'm sure I know what the consensus is, but comment below and tell me what your thoughts are, and I'll see you all very soon.